So thank you all very much for having me here today. I'm so excited to be able to be a part of this amazing community. What you're going to hear today is really 5 short stories about my own life and my own brushes with mental health. And I would challenge you all as well to kind of think about how mental health has impacted you personally, but also your own decisions to be here as helpers and providers who want to give back to a community or want to be able to provide them with something that maybe they don't have access to, or we know that with all the great information that Daniel has given us today, have been so many challenges in codifying into legislation as well. And so the title of this talk is really, We Are All Human. So I'm going to ask for all of you guys to do a little bit of audience participation for me first. So when I say we are all human, what does that mean to y'all? Yell out some words or phrases. So we have feelings. What else? We have commonalities. We're fallible. And stressed out. Hopefully you're not right now, because we're all centered. And imperfect. And I think if you kind of start thinking about that, I want you to keep that framework in mind as we think about sort of how we are all human and how you bring that to what you do every single day. I want to also, at certain points throughout this talk, I'm going to ask you to say that phrase for me as well. So I will go like this, and that is your cue to say, we're all human. Okay, excellent. So I'm going to tell a little story about where I came from. So I'm very fortunate to be able to be part of 9 News, to be part of the University of Colorado through their different programs that I've been involved in, and then also now to be a practicing provider at the VA as well. And so I emigrated here with my sisters and my mom and my dad from the UAE when I was 1 year old. And so as you can imagine, being an immigrant, there's a lot of challenges that we think about. And so as we think about the continuum of healthcare, we're talking about childhood, adulthood, and then of course how that impacts us into our kind of later years in life as well. So being an immigrant, I came from a family where the sort of social norms were what you would think of from parents who were coming from India. So there was a lot of domestic violence where I grew up. There was a lot, oftentimes my father had anger management issues. My mom suffered from undiagnosed clinical depression. And as a child, that really manifested in my own sort of struggles with kind of who I was in this sort of new country that I was in, where I kind of knew the language. And then of course, how does that sort of bubble up into my daily life? And so I'm fortunate my sister is actually here as well too today from Chicago. So she can always chime in on some of these things too. She's probably got some better stories than I'm going to tell today, but that's okay. So, I spent a lot of my childhood really, I think, dealing with probably undiagnosed depression myself. And so my father was abusive to my mother and myself. We spent a lot of time actually locked up in a bedroom, hoping that he wouldn't come after us. And so that was something to think about, sort of what traumatizes you as a child, but of course also what impacts you as well. And because of the dynamics with my family, my mom had to be a single mom, raising 3 kids on $20,000 a year. And so she actually ended up having to take care of us and be at work all the time. So I was left at home alone. This is me on Christmas morning, holding M&Ms, I think. And as you can see, we sort of spent more and more time. I spent a lot of time actually by myself because my sisters were 9 and 6 years older. And so as a child, how do you cope with sort of being by yourself and being lonely and having to take care of yourself? At first grade, I used to let myself into my own house and stay there for 2 to 3 hours by myself, which now in hindsight with a 3-year-old, there's no way in heck I would ever do that, let me tell you. But at 5, I was doing that. I was letting myself into my house. And so I turned to food oftentimes. And so I had if you kind of see this picture, it's not just bad hair, I swear. It is actually bad hair, but I really went to sort of binge eating and was, I remember in 6th grade, 200 pounds, heavier than my mom, and 8 inches shorter than I am right now. And thinking about sort of how I was dealing with sort of being alone, being, kind of in this new situation by myself, having sisters that unfortunately were older than me, that really affected a lot of my own mental health, and I had turned to food for that. You'll see the picture of the dog up there. In 1st grade, I had to make a choice. Was I going to be a dog? That was literally my career path at that time. Or a doctor. So I chose to be a doctor. Good news, I guess, for all of us here, hopefully today. But it just sort of tells you that when you're in your childhood, you have to we've got a lot of children that we're dealing with every day with mental health issues. And I think oftentimes we underestimate their coping mechanisms or where they go to cope or how they choose to cope. And I think this really sort of, for me, was my way of trying to sort of say, okay, I know this isn't normal. I know that this isn't right, but this is where I am and this is how I'm going to cope with it. And so we fast forward, I should say, to high school and to junior high as well. So I'm gonna take a moment and say, audience participation. There we go, good. So we're all human and we all have to learn how to cope, right? So I think when we start to think about the people that we're interacting with, especially children that we're thinking about, think about how they're coping and how they're choosing to cope, whether that's you yourself, how you chose to cope with your own childhood, or whether it's the people that you're working with now as your patients, or the community that you're working with and how they're looking to cope with their own issues. So keep that framework in mind as, again, we think about the continuum of mental health. So I fast forward now to the second part of my story here, which is junior high and high school. So junior high and high school, I decided that I was no longer gonna be fat. I was no longer gonna be bullied at school. And I decided that it was time for me to let my perfectionist tendencies kick in fully. And so they did. So I grew 8 inches, lost 50 pounds, joined track and badminton. Yes, I was a state championship badminton player. I bet you all didn't know that. So if anyone wants to go play outside today, it's on. But what I did was I sort of took that childhood, all of those sort of memories and experiences, if you will, and channeled them into losing weight, to being a straight-A student in high school, to knowing that my mom was a single mother who wasn't going to be able to put us through high school or through college. I said, hey, you know what? The only way I'm going to get to college if I get a scholarship. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to join tennis. I'm going to join basketball. I'm going to join newspaper, yearbook, student council. The list kind of goes on, and get straight A's. And so I did it up until senior year, where I decided to be fallible, if you will. I'll be imperfect, if you will, for the first time. So I went on a band trip. Does anything good ever happen on a band trip? I'm just asking. I think it's a legitimate question. So we went on a band trip to London. I played the clarinet from 4th grade up until senior year of high school. Went to London, marched in this fantastic New Year's Day parade, amazing experience, and decided for the first time that I was not going to be the goody two-shoes that I always was, and I was going to drink alcohol with 5 of my not really good friends on my band trip. And so what did I do? I drank 5 shots of tequila. I remember that clearly, which for the first time ever is probably not a good idea. So just FYI. And ultimately went downstairs, got caught, and ended up getting suspended for 3 days from school. And so what was that life lesson that I had learned at that time? I'm not perfect. I'm never going to be perfect, right? Because we're all human, right? I ended up getting my first B, and so I became salutatorian. And life wasn't over, fortunately. So even though it felt like it was when I got suspended for 3 days from school. But again, I think what this really kind of keeps in mind is that we're going to make mistakes. A lot of the people that we care for every day have made poor decisions, whether it's on a moment's notice of, a band trip in London, drinking alcohol for the first time, or maybe it's choosing to be addicted to opioids, or maybe it's choosing to beat their wife. I think that just something to kind of keep in mind, again, as a framework for what we consider sort of when we're taking care of these patients as their providers. So now we're going to fast forward. I went through undergrad and medical school at the University of Illinois at Chicago, went to residency training at Emory University. So I worked primarily at the Grady Hospital, which was basically a level 1 trauma center where I worked very closely with people who were experiencing all of life's health inequities in many ways. And that really, I think, as an emergency medicine physician, told me that I was in the right place, helping the right people, helping them get through whatever crisis had actually happened at that day and at that time that had made them come to visit me. And so again, that gave me, I think, a huge perspective and really sort of also bubbled up into my research career where I started thinking about, gosh, where you live really matters, social determinants of health. Ended up going to Michigan to do an RWJ Clinical Scholars Program to get my master's in health services research, and ultimately came to Colorado to be a part of this community because I knew this community truly was a community where they lived and breathed by the neighborhoods that everybody lives in. Everyone really has, I think, by just given the fact that we just sang happy birthday to Colorado, some deep sense of pride in the state that they live in. But I think more importantly, it also gave me a sense of belonging for the first time and feeling like, after having a very tumultuous childhood, feeling like I really belonged in Colorado. I'm going to fast forward to July 20th, 2012. So I was one of 2 emergency physicians who was on that night for the Aurora Theater shooting. And still gets a little choked up every time I talk about it, but we were on our 6th anniversary. And I think it was one of those first moments that I felt as a provider, I was more than just a provider. I was really engaging with my community, being a part of it. And then I think ultimately helping people at maybe their worst time, if you will. Still get choked up on the 6th anniversary. So I think the thing that we probably don't realize is that we're trained providers. All of us sitting in this room have had a lot of training in physical health, mental health, emotional health. And I think that we don't really, we underestimate what that means in terms of our own emotional health. And so on that night, I got to work with an amazing team of people, and ultimately then spent the next 2 weeks telling the world about what we had just experienced. And so whether that's locally with 9 News, that's actually how I became sort of part of that family, or whether it was part of kind of the broader international community, as I was on BBC talking about, wow, I just helped 23 victims of the Aurora shooting. Every single person survived. And here I am sitting here as a provider talking about what an amazing team effort it is. First responders, police, family members, everybody came together to be a part of that community that night, and they're continuing to be. And I think what that moment in time really gave me was a greater insight into what emotional toll does that take on us as providers. And I see a lot of shaking heads. And I would say that as it's hard to not internalize a lot of those great stories that you hear, or even the bad stories that you hear, right? So, even in residency, I still think back to the 3-year-old child who was shot in the head in a drive-by shooting, and we couldn't save that child. So, and as I interact with my own 3-year-old, that sometimes comes to light. And so I think one of the things that I've become very passionate about is talking about what happens to providers, whether they're first responders, whether they're police, paramedics, firefighters, whether it's the mental health provider in the community, whatever your role is, how do you internalize that trauma that you just had happen? And I think a lot of us don't realize how traumatic that really is to so many of us. And so I think it's important to think about PTSD. I think I had it for sure for the first 6 months, probably the 12 months after that specific night. I remember right after the incident happened, I heard some backfiring cars a car backfire in the street. And I remember turning to my husband saying, is somebody shooting at us right now? And so, again, if you think about sort of what role hearing that story or taking care of that child who's been abused by their parents, who's now in the foster care system, who has to now deal with all of these other kind of issues, I think, what role does that have on you as well? I think that's really important for us to take into mind as we start thinking about caring for ourselves. I say this a lot probably on 9 News too, but if you don't put your own oxygen mask on first, you can't help anybody else. And so I do think it's important for us to remember we're all human, right? We have emotions, we have feelings, and ultimately what we have to do is figure out how are we going to make it to that next morning. And oftentimes it's easier. Some days it's easier, I should say, than others. But again, I think it's important for us to recognize that there are some days that we don't want to get out of bed, and that's okay. And it's going to have to be okay. So then I'm going to fast forward a little bit into my now sort of career with the VA. I chose to work in the VA for a very specific reason. I felt a lot of empathy for many of our veterans in a completely different way than I had prior to sort of the Aurora shooting, in the sense that I understood now kind of what, to a very minimal degree, PTSD meant. And some of the conditions that they were battling when they returned from their own sort of wars that they had been fighting, whether it was being deployed in Afghanistan, whether it was coming back and trying to reintegrate into their communities, or whether it was seeing things, feeling things, doing things that they shouldn't be doing when they're 17 years old. And so I chose to work at the VA in the emergency department there, and I got very involved now with the opioid epidemic, partially because I work a lot of overnights, and a lot of times, a lot of mental health emergencies don't happen between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday on non-holidays. And so here I was in the emergency department, time and time again, taking care of really young people who had very serious substance abuse disorders, and wondering what role did I play as an emergency department provider. And so what we did was we actually launched an entire initiative to work on decreasing opioid prescribing in the emergency department. So I started to bring in my PhD skills in health services research, combine that with the emergency department, and then combine that with really some amazing partners nationally in pharmacy benefits management as well as academic detailing. And we started a pilot project in Denver where we said, hey, look, we've got huge variation in terms of how ED providers are prescribing opioids. We had one provider who was prescribing 25% of the time, and then we had another provider who, with the same patient pool, was prescribing opioids at about 1% to 2% of the time, which actually happens to be me, but that's okay, in full disclosure. But again, the patient populations weren't dramatically different. And so what we did was we started looking at what were those differences, using academic detailing, audit and feedback, put together a toolkit for ED docs, for patients, looked at alternative treatment options, pathways, a lot of the work actually that many of you guys are actually pioneering, if you will. And we were able to show really over time, we went from an average of 9% about 6 months ago in terms of our opioid prescribing rates in the ED, and we're now down to 2.4%. And I will say that makes me so happy to say that. And I think pain is so important, and we need to make sure we treat pain, but I also know that we as emergency department providers really impact the opioid epidemic in so many different ways, and we have such a first-line approach to it. And so what you can see here is that big red line is us in Denver. We started working in Muskogee, Oklahoma City as well, and you can kind of see that their providers have actually started to decrease their prescribing as well too, and this is recent data as of just even a few months ago. And we just released our Q3 data, and that line continues to go down. And then in September, we're actually launching our own national ED opioid prescribing initiative, where we'll take our lessons learned from Denver, partner with academic detailing, and then launch this nationally in 142 VAs as well. And so it's exciting to see the work really kind of bubbling up. But I think ultimately what this work has really shown me is that, again, we're all human, right? So do ED doctors wake up in the morning saying that I want to create patients that are addicts? No, right? Are we expected to take care of acute pain conditions and do it in a way that, sort of makes sense for the patient, but also makes us feel like we're providing the right level of care for that person as well? Yes, but how do we figure out how to get past that and really move to alternatives as well too? So again, we're all human. We all have different ways of treating patients as ED providers, but this is really one way of sort of thinking about how to kind of standardize that as well. And I think the last part of my story I just want to kind of mention as well too is that I'm very fortunate to now have a new role with 9News as well, to be their medical expert as of January. And one of the segments that I like to do is something called Fact or Fiction, because I think there's a lot of it out there. There's probably more fiction than there is fact, but that's okay. I'm not Dr. Oz. I'm going to throw that out there. So I don't believe in green tea. So anyways, but I do think that as we all sit here in the community of folks here at the Colorado Health Symposium, I want to challenge you all as well to think about the media as a partner, right? As a way to get your message across, as a way to take all of the amazing work that you're doing maybe in a smaller location and sharing those lessons learned and being able to give that information to a larger audience, if you will. I feel fortunate that I can take some of my public health training, my doctorally training, my researchly training, and then of course all of the other experiences that I've had as a person to then hopefully then bring that back to the community as well and really give them an opportunity to ask questions, number one, because there's never a stupid question, and number two, also hopefully bring them accurate information in a way that both makes sense, but also makes them feel like we're all human, right? So your doctor's human, your mental health provider's human, your counselor's human. there shouldn't be any barriers between how you feel and what you tell other people as well. And I think, if you kind of put together this conglomeration of my sort of personal journey as to kind of how I've ended up here, I guess, standing in front of you all, I think one of sort of the overarching themes that I hope resonates in some of the stories that I've told you about my own personal life is that there is a mental health stigma, right? And we know that. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes again in the panel discussion as well. And I think thinking about the experiences that you have as a person, as a human being, and how you bring that to the table and how you interact with the folks that you're trying to help, I think hopefully will give us a better perspective of how to sort of destigmatize that idea of mental health. It's not a weakness. It's not a bad thing. It's actually probably life, right? Because I think if we all think about our own lives themselves, we are human beings. We weren't really created to handle a lot of these great stressors, right? And we don't necessarily always have the best coping skills, which is why we may turn to abuse or to substances or to whatever else makes us feel better that day, or to food, for me when I was in 4th grade. And so I think, again, keeping that in mind, hopefully, we can destigmatize mental health. We can all remember that we are all human, so therefore everybody else that we're taking care of is also going to be human as well, and be fallible, be imperfect, have feelings, not be able to handle stressors, as we had talked about as well. And so I'm just going to end it with some of the words that I think, to me, resonate as what does being human mean. And a lot of these have HUM as their sort of first part of their words. So humanity, obviously that's important as we are thinking about how we want to care for not just Coloradans, but really everybody in the world. Staying humble. Humility, which I think is what oftentimes can sometimes set up these poor patient relationships as well too, because I think people think, oh, well, you're the provider, you know so much, or you don't know how to talk to me. So how do you stay humble and really think about getting that message across in a way that makes sense? It makes them remember that you're just as human as they are. Humanitarianism. Humor, because if you can't laugh at yourself or show a picture of your dog and how you wanted to be a dog in 1st grade, how are you ever going to get anything across? And then, of course, that we're all human. Thank you. Thank you, Bruce.